Everyone in the city believed Richard Vale was untouchable, the kind of wealthy man whose name opened doors before he even knocked, whose presence alone commanded silence in rooms full of powerful people. But what nobody knew was that on the night his reputation almost died, it wasn't a business rival or a scandal that broke him. It was a single glass of alcohol slipping from his hand and shattering on the marble floor of his own living room while his wife watched him with eyes full of fear, instead of love. The rumors the next morning were brutal and fast, whispers of the rich man who lost control, stories exaggerated and twisted, but all of them pointed to the same truth. When Richard drank, the dignity he had built for 20 years evaporated in minutes, and Amora, the woman who had loved him before the money, before the suits, before the guards and gates, knew that if something didn't change, everything would collapse. That night, while he sat on the couch with his head in his hands, ashamed and silent, Amora did something no one else had ever dared to do. She took the bottle from the table, walked to the kitchen, poured it down the sink, and told him in a calm but unbreakable voice that alcohol was no longer welcome in their family, because it stole his respect, his image, and slowly, his soul. Richard laughed bitterly at first, wounded in his pride, but the laughter died when she placed a watermelon on the table and said something that sounded almost insane. From now on, when the urge to drink came, he would eat watermelon instead, in front of everyone if necessary, because sweetness could replace poison, and discipline could replace chaos. He felt humiliated, controlled, stripped of choice, and for weeks the sadness inside him grew heavier than any hangover, especially when his friends mocked him behind smiles, calling it a joke, calling him weak, not knowing that Amora had placed one more rule that cut even deeper. If he ever drank again, it would only be in controlled moments, with trusted friends, never in public, never where his name could be dragged through the mud. Because power without restraint was just another form of poverty. The pressure nearly destroyed their marriage. Nights passed in silence, mornings came with tension, and Richard began to believe that love had turned into a prison until one evening, alone on the terrace, staring at the city lights he once ruled with confidence, he picked up a slice of watermelon out of anger, bit into it aggressively, and suddenly felt something unexpected. Clarity. No spinning head, no loose tongue, no regret, just calm. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and without realizing it, his discipline reshaped him. His health improved, his focus sharpened, his business decisions became cleaner, stronger, and people began to notice that Richard Vale spoke less but meant more, smiled less but carried weight, and somewhere along the way, the mockery stopped. The shocking moment came at a high-profile gala when champagne flowed freely and cameras hovered everywhere. A rival deliberately offered Richard a glass, expecting a public failure, but Richard calmly declined, lifted a plate of fresh watermelon instead, and smiled, and the room froze before erupting into quiet admiration, because confidence had replaced addiction. That night, Amora watched him from across the room with tears she didn't wipe away, realizing that control had turned into partnership, and sacrifice into strength. Years later, their story became an unspoken lesson among the elite, that true wealth wasn't drinking without limits or showing excess, but mastering oneself when nobody else could. And in their private home, laughter returned, trust grew deeper, and love matured into something unbreakable. Richard no longer saw watermelon as a punishment but as a symbol of the moment his life turned around, and Amora no longer feared losing him to his own habits, because together they had transformed shame into respect, control into freedom, and a near-tragic downfall into a legacy of quiet, powerful happiness.